We're combining all the best old school wisdom with all the top new school methods to bring you the optimal way to coach and play the great game of baseball. This is the 80-20 Baseball Masterclass with Coach Bo.
Welcome, coaches. 80-20 Baseball. Coach Bo here, episode 102. A couple announcements first. We have our fall coaching clinic online. Email me if you're interested in joining us for that. The date and time will be announced by the end of this week. And the second quick announcement, next week, you're going to want to tune in next Tuesday when the next episode comes out. I'm going to take this extensive list. I believe it's almost 6 dozen items that a certain coach, I'm not going to say the coach's name, but this is a list of almost 6 dozen items that they coach their players up on. 6 dozen. And now, while this list is spot on in terms of what they're covering, and these things are all something, or they are at least something small that will come up in the course of a college season or professional season because of the length. And also some of the items are specific to upper level. This is something I saw posted, and we're going to discuss the pros and the cons of having a list this big. And we're going to discuss why it's important. And I'm going to discuss actually how one item that it's missing entirely, and one way that this list is entirely, I think, missing the mark, and only insofar as we can learn from it. It's interesting. The baseball community is very interesting. The baseball coaching community, it's very, baseball is kind of stuck in its ways. It's been stuck in its ways on a coaching level. Now, the front offices have broken away from that. And you see those teams like the Astros, the Red Sox, the Dodgers, the Giants, they've gotten away from that. The president of the Giants baseball operations, the baseball president for the Giants, the San Francisco Giants, was the old Dodgers general manager. He's not a baseball player at all. And he's built a really good team. Obviously, he's got some phenomenal help, and it's definitely more than a one-man show. It's quite a few layers to build up that team. But the front offices, my point is the front offices in baseball have learned that you need to evolve, you need to improve. Look at the car industry. Could you imagine the car industry not evolving? Could you imagine the Pintos and the Datsuns out there versus these Teslas and these new trucks, Dodge, the Ford, the Toyota trucks, the Chevy trucks, the difference now? Could you imagine if it didn't evolve? Could you imagine where we'd be at? What about in medicine? Could you imagine? It's like, I'm a type 1 diabetic. 100 years ago, medicine evolved so much that type 1 diabetics didn't just get a death sentence because they got type 1 diabetes. Insulin was developed, and the progress in so many areas. Look at technology, the progress. Look at the first iPhone and look at the iPhone 13. Look at the difference. It's just unbelievable how much the difference is. Look at houses now. Look at everything in the world is advancing. Everything is advancing to get better, hopefully to get better. That's the goal. And so to wrap that up into the baseball community progressing forward conversation or topic, it's just interesting how slow it moves. And there's 2 reasons for this. One, I think it's ego. I think coaches get stuck in their way, and then they also have to say like they were wrong and they coached it up the wrong way for 10 years. I got no problem talking about the errors I made. I've definitely gotten better in the 15, 17 years that I've coached. I've made huge adjustments in how I coach now versus how I coached then. But the ego holds us back, because if we say that we're going to now coach it this way, then that means we are by default saying that we were coaching it incorrectly before, and then admitting we were wrong is so hard for all of us. So I am going to discuss what is going on with this list of almost 6 dozen items. I'm also going to point out the number 1 flaw in this list. All right, let's get into part 1, book recommendation. I got a book recommendation. I'm coming back around. Book recommendation. I did these early on. I'm coming back around. Once a month, I'm going to make a book recommendation. So once a month should give you time to go out and listen to it or read that book. Think Again by Adam Grant. The title of the book is Think Again by Adam Grant. This is a good book. Adam Grant's written some good books. This is a good book. It's not a baseball book, but it's definitely a useful book when it comes to what we were discussing just a second ago, when we need to think again and assess what we currently think and believe, and not be afraid to shift away from those currently held beliefs and our past beliefs and things. We need to evolve our thinking. And I'm sure you would all agree with that. We need to consistently or continually evolve and optimize our knowledge. And this book, Think Again, is a really, really good book because it discusses the operating system type of thing. It discusses operating system level ideas ideas. And I'm big on that. If you've listened to me from the get-go, I'm big on changing, improving, optimizing those overarching strategies, the operating system. I'm big on operating system level changes, and I'm really big on coaching that up and working with you coaches on this, because each of you is going to have different types of players. You're going to have different combinations of players, teammates. You're going to have different equipment constraints or access to more or less equipment or different types of facilities. You might have different practice time allotments. You're in different areas of the country, so you have weather that's different in different areas. Things are just varied across the board. And for that reason alone, I'm such a huge fan of making and optimizing the operating system level stuff. Big things that then can trickle down or flow down into a lot of different areas of your coaching. The book Think Again by Adam Grant is really good to make sure that we keep our operating system fine-tuned. And the book Think Again discusses and shares out and explains how we can be more careful, how we can have keen or better awareness of where we are biased with our thoughts or where we need to be in terms of moving forward with our thoughts, with our ideas, with the way we live our lives. In this case, how we coach baseball. We need to be open-minded. Think Again does a great job of making us think again about how we think and how our thoughts have come to be. Now, here's an interesting caveat to this, and I haven't heard this anywhere else about this book. This book's pretty popular. An interesting thought about this book as I read it, but I couldn't help but know, and I don't even think the author, Adam Grant, realizes he's doing this, because it would have probably changed or not be the same throughout the entire book. But the author doesn't use the words likely or maybe or it could be or it's possible. Everything that the author says is very in a definitive tone. What's interesting about that, the entire book is about how we need to second guess and not be so anchored to what we think. The whole book is about the Dunning-Kruger effect. It's about having these biases. Yet it's interesting that the author actually is very definitive in how he writes it. The narrative is very definitive in how everybody else is wrong about how they think. So for me, I thought that was an interesting observation about a book that was basically the whole summation of the book is how we are not really good at what we think, and what we think a lot of times can be wrong. And then here is the author sharing out a lot of, and I'm not talking about the studies when he talks about a meta-analysis of that or the study here or study there. When he gives out opinions or when he gives out a narrative that's not based on actual fact, it's more of a narrative and how he wraps the story together. He doesn't use the word likely and maybe and things like that. Now, to me, that's a red flag also. I'm a big fan of looking at red flags, like with coaching. If you're a high school baseball coach and your alumni game, and let me back up. If you're a high school baseball coach and you've been at the school for like 10 years, 15, 20 years, and your alumni game can barely field a team, if you can barely field a team for your alumni game, or you don't have very many players coming back, or when they come back, they're not coming up to you and giving you a big hug or giving you a big handshake, they're over in the other dugout, that's a huge red flag. That's a huge red flag, because if you're coaching up players that come back for, say, an alumni game, which is popular at the college and high school level, if you don't have, of course, not every player is going to come back. They move and they travel and they're busy and they can't make it. They have their own kids now. But you should have a pretty good turnout for an alumni, once a year alumni game. If you're a quality coach that's been at a program for 10, 15, 20 years or more, you should have a lot of people coming back eager to get there. In fact, I've shared with you, my dad coached for years. He coached me all the way through Little League and Pony League and all that. And I don't go one visit with an old friend that played with me or played against me when I was younger without them asking me about how my dad is doing. In fact, sometimes that's the first thing they ask is how my dad's doing. What kind of coach do you want to be? All right, what kind of coach do you want to be? So Think Again, check it out. Adam Grant, great book. I just saw a little bit of a red flag there when the whole book is about how we need to second guess, triple guess the way we think. And there's not the words like likely, maybe. Everything is very matter of fact in the narrative. So, but nevertheless, the book is very good. Definitely worth the read or the listen. Think Again. And it really kind of made me think deeply about all the stuff we've heard over the years. A lot of you are my age. You've been around baseball a while. You've played a long time ago, whether it was Little League or high school or whatnot. And it makes me think about the baseball coaching community. It's almost a book that the baseball coaching community could probably use more than anybody or any other entity out there. Good book. Check it out. Think Again by Adam Grant. I like where he's going. I think these are things, these topics, these books can shape the society, shape our world, and definitely shape the baseball coaching community to be better. And if in doubt, nobody else reads it, but you read it, you're going to have an advantage because you're going to have fewer and smaller blind spots with your coaching and with your living. So last week I was sitting there, I was in my garage doing a little workout, and it just hit me. Sometimes when I'm exercising, sometimes when I'm in the middle of something like a project or something, the thoughts, it's kind of that being in the moment, the consciousness, the mind, then all of a sudden you get these really ideal, crystal clear like thoughts about things, you kind of the dots come together. And I go, using batting average to assess a hitter's productivity is like using a scale and somebody's weight to assess their overall health. So I've talked about batting average being not the best stat, and definitely there's some stats that even youth coaches could easily calculate, formulate, keep track of that are a lot more indicative, a lot more useful in terms of telling you as the coach and the players how productive an offensive player they are, how productive a hitter they are. So the other day I'm in the garage working out and I got a scale there, and once a week, twice a week, I'll hop on it just to get a ballpark idea of where I'm going with those LBs. And I got on the scale. I thought I'd go, well, here's my weight. And it hit me. I go, this is like batting average. For example, I'm 6'7", I'm 250 pounds. Now, if somebody came up to you and said, how much you weigh? Or if I'm on the phone with a doctor and they go, so what's your weight? And I said, 250 pounds. 250 pounds to a doctor over the phone might be a red flag. Whoa, 250. Hey, have you been checked for type 2 diabetes? Hey, how's your diet? But if you see somebody that's 6'7", 6'8", that's 250 pounds, but exercises consistently like I do, has a body fat percentage well under 20%, you'd probably have a better idea of where my health is at. The blood work, if you look at blood work, that's going to give you a good analysis. If you look at vitals, that's going to give you a much deeper analysis. Taking batting average to determine the overall health of a hitter's productivity is like using a scale, like using your weight, somebody else's weight, anybody's weight to determine their health. So batting average, it could be an accurate assessment, an accurate number to assess and to measure somebody's productivity at the plate, but it also could and has a lot of blind spots. Speaking of blind spots that we're talking about earlier in the book, Think Again, batting average has some blind spots. So just keep that in mind as you rely or don't rely, hopefully rely less on using batting average. It'd be like using your gross revenue as the indication or the assessment tool to see how healthy your business is. Gross revenue is not going to tell you everything. You have expenses, you have cost of goods, you have a lot of things involved in there. Insurance, you have a lot of overhead, things you got to factor in. You could be making, your revenue could be going up every single year, and your profit and what you're making and things you can put back into the company, all that's going down. You're actually losing and hemorrhaging money. All right, priorities. Part 3 here. Priorities of coaching. There's 2 things that need to come before you teach players, or at least simultaneously to you teaching and instructing and tutoring players with their skills. There's 2 things that need to supersede, that need to precede all of that, or at least at a minimum congruently. There's 2 things you need to do. Step 3 in the coaching process is teaching the player the skill, the strategy, the mechanics, the movement. That's part 3. Part 1, you need to get the players to know, they need to like you, they need to trust you, or at least they need to trust you. If they don't really like you, they need to trust you. They need to know that they can depend on you. They need to have rapport and connection with you. They need to have rapport and connection built and established before you can move to step 2, or at least at a minimum doing it congruently at the same time simultaneously. You need to be building that rapport and connection with your players. And then step 2 to coaching, players need to be sold. They need to buy in to the importance of what you're teaching them to do, or why they're training a certain way, why you're having them do this drill or that thing or that swing type or that pitching delivery. Players need to be sold on the importance and the why behind what you're teaching them. First, you got to build rapport and connection. Second, then you got to sell them. Now they got your trust. Now there's that connection. Now you need to sell them on the importance of what you're teaching them. Players need to first build rapport. They need to trust you. They need to have connection with you. They need to know you care about them as a person, as a human. Then from there, you move to the, hey, I got to sell my players on why we're doing this. I need buy-in. They need to buy in on the importance of what you're teaching them and why you're training them a certain way and why the team is going through these drills or that drill and whatnot. And then part 3 is teaching them the skill, the mechanics, the pitching delivery, the swing technique, the ground ball fielding technique, the fly ball technique, the relay technique, the bunting technique, yada, yada, yada. Now you can jump in to that first part and have a little success or have some success for a little while, some temporary success, but eventually you're going to, or rather quickly in most cases, you're going to have to build that rapport and connection up. Now, the way I recommend it is you teach all 3 simultaneously, or at least you start with the rapport and the connection heavy early, and then sell them on the why heavy early. And with the selling of the importance, getting the player buy-in, that's pretty steady throughout the season. So you really want to get that connection as a priority early, or build that rapport and make that a priority early on. Getting the player buy-in is something that you'll do a little more up front, but you'll maintain it at a pretty consistent level throughout the season. And then with the skill development, you want the skill development, the technique, teaching of the technique, the pitching delivery, the swing technique, ground ball technique, all that stuff. You want to start to increase that as the season. So you want to start kind of slow with that, and then you want to build up throughout the year. Of course, that's not always going to be the same with every player. Some players are dialed in, and you don't want to just make adjustments and changes and things like that if you don't need to. But for the most part, you will infuse and you will tutor and mentor players more on their technique and skill sets as you get, you'll do it more as you get further into the season. You're definitely going to do it at the beginning, but it should be a gradual increase, or there might be a little spike and then kind of a spike where the trend is going up. Y'all know what I mean. The main message here is you first have to have that rapport and connection. That's the first importance, connection. You got to get them to know, like, and trust you, or at least they got to know you're coming from a good place and they got to trust you. Players also need to be sold on the importance of what you're teaching them and how it's going to benefit the team and how it's going to benefit them individually. Now, you can live in fantasy land and say, oh, it's all about the team. It's all about the team. You can live in that world, but I'm telling you right now, my opinion, that's not the best way to handle it. My opinion, you sell it on the importance of how the team's going to win more, but also how it's going to help each player. It's a win-win-win. It'll help the team, it'll help the player, or vice versa. It'll help the player, which will help the team, and then you as a coach are going to have more fun. It's going to be a better experience, and you're going to win more. So there's the 3-step process when it comes to coaching: connection, player buy-in, skill, technique development. First, build connection with your players, get them to trust you, know that you're coming from a good place, know that you care about them. Second, get player buy-in, sell the players with the truth on what you're teaching them and how it's going to help them. Connect the dot, let them see clearly why what they're doing is going to help them and how it's going to help them and the team be better. Be very clear on this. Be very specific. Don't just say, hey, we're going to be a better team because of this. That's vague. That's general. I don't recommend using that very often. Or, hey, this is going to make you a better player. Hey, you're going to probably have a better baseball career because of this. I really believe you want to be more specific as to what they're going to get out of it, what the team's going to get out of it. Again, you can live in a fantasy world that you just tell kids, do this, and they're going to all just jump. Yeah, jump how high? No, that's not the world that anybody's ever lived in wholly, and probably less now than ever. So you shouldn't sit there and beg players to do what you need them to do, and you shouldn't have to oversell what you're doing. In fact, I've talked about not overselling it. Be concise, be clear, and then move forward. When you start trying to oversell, that's a red flag to kids, and kids will sniff that out in a second. They know when you're not being, they know when it comes out like that, it's like, this coach is overselling this. I don't like this. That takes practice, how much, when to cut it off, and when to move into the drill or whatever it is you're teaching them or working with them on that day. But you got to have the rapport and the connection. Then you got to get them to buy into what you got to sell it. You got to get them to buy in, and then you teach them the hitting skills, the pitching skills, the ground ball skills, the base running skills. All right, I think it's important. Now, you can do one without the other, and you could even get into skills first, but that's not going to last very long. You're not going to make it very far. I mean, you might not even make it a week or two before you start getting a little bit of a rebellion. You might get a little bit of resentment. You might get players that'll start to kind of half listen or half take your word and use it. And it's definitely not sustainable, and it's not going to last the entire year unless you build that connection or rapport and build player buy-in and you sell them on what they're doing. It doesn't matter. You could be the greatest tactician and technician, I should say. You could be the greatest tactician and the greatest technician in the history of baseball skill development and strategy development. It doesn't matter if you don't build that connection, genuine connection, and then genuinely sell them on the importance of what they're about to do and why it's going to help them and the team be more successful. So to wrap it up here, Think Again, book recommendation, definitely worth the read. I give you these recommendations and I want you to know that I read about 4 books to 5 books every month. And I don't make a lot of recommendations on this podcast. I've only recommended, I think, 5 books so far in 102 episodes. I am definitely not recommending every book that I read, and not even close. Probably every 10th or 15th book that I read, I feel is something that is definitely worth your time. Now, the other books can be good, but I want to share with you the biggest needle movers, and that's the idea of the 80-20 Baseball podcast. We're focused on the massive, big needle movers first, and then when we have time, we'll get into those little small, minute, little acute details and acute improvements, areas that we can improve. But we want to nail the big needle movers first and then move from there, not the other way around. Some of my other book recommendations, Jocko Willink has a couple books out. 2 of those books I think are phenomenal. In fact, there's one called Leadership, Strategy, and Tactics by Jocko. It's a field manual, Leadership, Strategy, and Tactics. I recommended this book a while back. That's a great one. And he doesn't mention the word baseball in it or sports, but it is phenomenal. His first book is best known or most well-known book, Extreme Ownership. That's a good one too. But I like the Leadership, Strategies, and Tactics because it's literally that same book plus more of an applicable approach to it, with the caveat that everything you hear in it, you have to translate it into baseball and coaching and being out on the baseball field with players, not necessarily in business or in military situations. And by far my number one book recommendation, and nobody's even coming close to this, no author, no book has come close since I read this about 10 years ago, The Power of Now. That to me is the ultimate game changer of all game changers. It helps you deal with umpires. It helps you stay calm and collected out there on the field. It helps you stay relaxed throughout your whole life. The Power of Now is, to me, of all the books I've read, the biggest game changer of all, by Eckhart Tolle. Some people call him Eckhart Tolle, but I've heard him say Eckhart Tolle himself. But nonetheless, it's a huge bestseller. Power of Now. The Power of Now is massive. Check out Leadership, Strategies, and Tactics, and check out this new book by Adam Grant, Think Again. And would you like your doctor to grade your health simply based off what the scale says, what your weight is? I don't think that's accurate. I don't think that's fair. And I don't think you would like that. I think you'd like them to do a little bit more blood work, EKG. You'd like to get some vitals. You'd like them to run a VO2 max test. You'd like a little more in-depth analysis. You'd like some MRI, some fMRI when you need it. You don't just want to get on there and say, hey, what's your weight? And then thus you're going to fit into the healthy category, the unhealthy, or the moderately healthy category. You want more behind that. And that's where batting average has blind spots. It's better than nothing, but there's a heck of a lot that are a lot better than batting average. Start with OPS, on base plus slugging. That's very easy to calculate for any coach with just a basic calculator, and then go from there. And then the coaching priorities, the 3 steps in coaching: build rapport, connection with players, then build buy-in. First, you got to get the rapport and connection. That's going to help the buy-in. And then once you get those 2 rolling, now you got players that are more like putty in your hand in terms of you being able to mold and shape them into the baseball players that you'd like them to be, or the baseball players that they want to be, into more successful players and a more successful team. All right, coaches, email me, Coach Bo, 8020baseball.com, Coach Bo at 8020baseball.com. The details and everything will be lined up here by the end of the week for the coaching clinic. Email me if you're interested and you want to get on that list, the invitee list. You can follow me on Twitter. I put out a few tweets a week, or I retweet the stuff that I really think is good, or I put a few tweets out that I really think can move the needle. 8020_baseball, 8020_baseball. That's at Twitter. Check out the website. If you haven't already, you got to go over there. You could spend probably 3-4 hours over there taking in, consuming what's over there, the articles, the videos, 8020baseball.com. All right, everybody, take care of yourselves, take care of your health, take care of those families, take care of your baseball family, the baseball community, by taking this stuff out there and utilizing it. Put it into action. Use it out there in the trenches with your players. Have a more enjoyable time out there with your team. Build better human beings through the vehicle of baseball, and win more games as icing on the cake. We'll see you here next week, next Tuesday, when the episode 103 comes off the factory line. Wishing you all the best. Until next week, adios.
This has been the 80-20 Baseball Masterclass. Take it to the field.